But that's just a couple of examples of the bureaucracy that is really holding back small business here in our country. And if it is one thing that we can see as as I said, a silver lining from this insanity that we're going through right now, is maybe the opportunity to loosen up some of these regulations and do some of the things that we need in our economy to get it going again, that President Trump has been wanting to do for the last 3.5 years and has been getting fought from Democrats and people who claim to be Republicans. And maybe we have a chance to get some of that done. And that's where I think having plans to do things is very important. And like I said, that's why the first thing that I did with my candidacy was to write out my plans of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do them. And so when I do get to Washington, there's no time wasted in that. I can simply submit them to whoever I have to, and we can see if they're good plans or if they need tweaking, and we can get rolling on things and maybe, like I said, just use the situation now to our advantage. So I was very happy to see that we're moving ahead with kind of deregulating or easing the regulations on our small, medium plants. And hopefully we can do this down the road across the board with other entities like the DNR, which is a real drawback to new plants opening up. And hopefully we can revitalize the industry. And like I said, it's a vital part of our national security and our food supply, so we can get that done. So like I said, I just wanted to touch on that. I know we advertise this as a healthcare discussion tonight, but I said I was very happy to see that happen, and I want to let everybody know that that had happened, and what a good idea it is to have plans when you're running for office. So I guess what I'd like to do right now is, if anybody has any questions on this, or if you have a healthcare question before I go into talking about my plans on healthcare, to go ahead right now and ask them, and maybe with your questions we can work into what I'm trying to do with the healthcare. So if there's anybody that has a question right now, go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll get you on the air and we'll talk to you. So.
Tom, this is Pamela.
Yeah, Pamela, how are you tonight?
I am good. So my healthcare question has to deal more specifically with veterans. Do you have any plans for the Veterans Administration, how to make their healthcare process any more efficient or effective? So even I know when they changed that a veteran could go to his own private doctor, they attached all these stipulations to when it would be appropriate or he would be allowed to go to his doctor. So I was just curious, is there any way to incorporate your healthcare plans to cover all American citizens?
Yeah, but I think that the veterans are in a special situation because I believe we do owe them more than what we owe the average American. I mean, these were people that were willing to put their lives on hold, put their lives on the line, so that we all could enjoy the liberties that we have. So I think we really need to do anything we can to help them get the care that they need. And I really did like the idea, because I know the veterans were pushing for it for a long time, because especially up in the Decorah area, we're an hour and a half, 2 hours away from any veteran hospital, and veterans had to travel that back and forth all the time if they wanted care. And so I thought it was a really great idea that we opened up this program where they could go to any hospital or any doctor. They could get the care they needed, and it would be taken care of through the Veterans Administration. But like you said, like with anything the government does, they can screw up a cannonball with a feather, I swear. And what we really need to do is get people in there that know what they're doing, I don't know whether that is putting veterans in charge of this, because it seems like we've tried experts in the field and they can't seem to get it done. Maybe if we had more people at the Veterans Administration running it and the executive positions that were actually veterans and maybe had experience with that. Experience is the greatest teacher in the world, and if we can get people in there that know what the problem is and how to fix it, and then the big thing is to listen to those type of people. You can't have people in there that have some good advice and then nobody listens to them. So, I think that's probably our biggest part of the solution, is getting people in there that actually have some experience with what's going on. And it doesn't mean you have to have a degree from any university. Just regular people that have had trouble dealing with this system throughout the years, and really sit down and, even if we have to form some kind of group to listen to these people, and like I said, then take their advice and, not drag our feet like we seem to do all the time in any kind of government program, and get them the help that they need.
Well, yeah, because currently there's, from what I can see, there's about 40,000 military charities out there right now, and they collect annually about $2.5 billion in donations, which doesn't really amount to much when you look at the number of veterans and military active duties and reservists that we have. So I was wondering if there was some way that they would be able to partnership even with the Veterans Administration, because they're obviously generating a goodly amount of funds, so they're having to administer those. So, if you foresee anything like that, where, like you were talking about, they could partner, not keep it all strictly government employees, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I know President Trump has been a big proponent of public-private partnerships, and like you said, we need people that know what they're doing. That doesn't mean that they have to be in the government, because there are a lot of people in the government that have no idea what they're doing and making rules for people. So, like I said, Trump's been a big proponent of public-private partnerships, and that's just something that we need to look at. Use these people's experience, not only in understanding what has to be done with the veterans to get them the care, but like you said, America is the most generous country in the world, that citizens really open up their hearts anytime anybody needs help, and if they're able to generate that type of revenue, and it's done on a voluntary basis, well then great, let's use that, and let's use that to help the veterans get the care that they need.
Well, I'll tell you what I'd like to see is the veterans have a card similar to the Medicare program. So if a doctor accepts Medicare, then he'll automatically be able to accept the veterans card, and provide services for those people. And then great, if they prefer to go to a veterans hospital, great, but otherwise they're covered just like anybody that had Medicare.
Yeah, personally, I believe that veteran card should be accepted anywhere. There's no reason that it shouldn't be. Like I said, these people have done a lot for us to ensure that we have a good life, that we live in safety and security, and there's no reason that they shouldn't be able to walk into any place with that card and get the care that they need, and that the place, that the facility they go into, will be assured that they're going to get paid.
Okay, well, I thank you for your time. I know I've taken up a lot of it.
No, I enjoy talking, and I enjoy good questions, and it seems like you're pretty informed too, so maybe you can be part of the solution someday.
Hopefully I will.
All right. Thank you, Pamela. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We got a question from Facebook. What do you think about mandatory vaccines? Very good question. Very good question. I know this is something that's a kind of a hot button subject right now. In some instances, I think this is great. when you talk about diseases like polio, measles, actual diseases that we have been able to almost completely eradicate from the face of the earth, diseases that we know actually created actual pandemics and killed people, when we're allowed to, when we can develop vaccines for that, I think that's a great thing. But I also understand people's constitutional rights. And if we have a polio vaccine and somebody does not want to take it, everybody else is covered by getting the polio vaccine. So if they decide, hey, I don't want this, that's their constitutional right, and they should be able to refuse it. And the thing I don't want to see is that when people refuse vaccines, when something happens, then they come back to the government and they say, well, you need to take care of us now, because all of our choices have consequences. And personal responsibility is one of the things that is very big in the Republican Party, along with constitutional rights. And if you're going to exercise your constitutional rights, then you have to accept the personal responsibility also. But in a case like this COVID-19 virus, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, we still know very little about it. The morbidity rate is no worse than a bad flu. And to force people with something like this to take a vaccine when we don't force people to take the regular flu vaccine. I know even up in the hospitals, my daughter is a nurse. She's not forced to take the flu vaccine. That's her choice. Again, if she gets sick, then she can't work. But with a mandatory vaccine on COVID-19, no, I'm not there yet. I don't think it rises to the level of making it mandatory. And so I'm completely against that. So, we have another question? We're getting it. If anybody on here, any of you that are on here now have a question, like I said, feel free to raise your hand and we can talk about it. As I said, especially if you have something about healthcare, that's what I kind of wanted this seminar to be about, and we can certainly tie it into some of the things that that I want to talk about with healthcare, because I really want to get into the insurance end of it, and I do want to talk about a little bit about the prescription drug end of it, because we haven't discussed that, especially with the prescription drugs. While we're waiting for a question, maybe I will talk a little bit about the prescription drugs here, because I know that's the other part of the healthcare. And just like the healthcare issue itself, the prescription drug issue has several facets to it that need to be discussed. And one of those facets is the amount of time and money it takes to get a drug from development, from when it's first developed into the market. Because I really think that people don't realize how long a time that is and how much money it takes and how much that actually adds to the cost of a drug. And currently, the amount of time that it takes from conception until it gets onto the market is 12 to 13 years. And drug companies spend on the average about $350 million a year trying to get a drug onto the market. And 1 out of every 10 drugs that they develop, only 1 out of 10 actually makes it onto the market. So the other 9 fail, and they fail at different phases of the trials. They can go through 11 years of trials, and from development, laboratory testing, and their phase 1, 2, and 3 trials on people. They can get to that 11th year and have spent millions of dollars, and all of a sudden the government can say, well, we really don't like this, and dump the drug and not allow it on the market. So that's one of the things that we have to address is the amount of time and money it takes to bring a drug to market. And again, I think the president is using this this crisis right now to show that that can be done, that we can shorten that time, because he's giving the drug companies a lot of leeway right now in developing drugs. And the other thing that he did was last year where he signed his right to try executive order, where if you were dying from a disease and there was an experimental drug on the market, if you wanted to try that drug, well, then you had the right to do it. And as long as you signed the papers, the waivers that didn't hold anybody responsible, you were allowed to try that drug. And I'm not trying to make everybody into a human guinea pig, but if you're dying from a disease and if you want to try a drug and that is going to help the rest of humanity, it's certainly something I would do. And I know there's probably many other people out there that would do it as well. And so stuff like that, and showing that we can actually shorten the time to bring a drug to market and that it is safe in doing so, is just, that's part of the solution that we need to do with prescription drugs. And the thing that we need to address is the pharmaceutical business managers. And I had a very good discussion with some pharmacists about this, because they were small private pharmacists, and this is their major concern, is they call them PBMs. And what a PBM is if you kind of, the way it was explained to me, if you kind of picture a wagon wheel, the PBM is in the middle. They're the hub of that wagon wheel, and they control the pharmacies. They control the drug companies, the production of drugs, and they also control the insurance companies. And the way they run it with the drug companies, they decide what drugs are going to be developed, and they were part of what happened with the whole opioid crisis, because there was another drug on the market that was a patch. It was a slow release patch. It was just as efficient as the opioids. It was a little more expensive. But the big thing was it wasn't addictive. And the PBMs didn't like that drug. They liked the opioids because it was cheap to produce. They could charge whatever they wanted for it, and unfortunately it was also addictive. And so they pushed opioids, and the way they did that was with the pharmacies. Like I said, they decide how much a pharmacy is going to get reimbursed for prescribing a certain drug, or when they sell the drug. It's the PBMs that decide how much the pharmacy gets reimbursed. And sometimes the small pharmacies are actually losing money on selling drugs, because the PBMs, that's the way it has set it up. And they also control the insurance companies by determining how much the insurance companies are going to reimburse everybody for this drug. And the worst thing with these PBMs is, the way it was described to me is, the one pharmacist that I talked to, he says, "Tom, do you remember back in 2008 with the housing crisis? And we had the mortgage companies that were bundling these mortgages together. They were selling them, and they were kind of doing this all under the table because they weren't regulated, and that's what created the whole mortgage crisis." And he said these PBMs, they operate the same way. They're not regulated. They operate in the dark. They can do basically whatever they want to do, and nobody can fight them. And their whole thing that they're trying to do right now is to get rid of the smaller pharmacies. And these pharmacists that I was talking to said these small independent pharmacies, that they're looking at losing 800 of these pharmacies a year until they're gone. So part of the things that we have to do with prescription drugs is to look into these PBMs, see what they're doing, see how they're controlling the pharmacies, the drug producers, the HMOs, and I'm not a big proponent of government regulation, but I'm also not a big proponent of monopolistic practices. And what you have here is definitely a monopoly, and it's something that we have to look into if we want to control prescription drug prices and bring good drugs to the market at an affordable price. One of the other things that we have to do is also look at buying drugs from other countries. But that is more of a problem price-wise from the things I've described here already. That's the reason why our drugs cost so much more. It's just because we have so much more regulation in bringing the drugs to market, getting them certified, and then who's controlling them. And I think if we address that problem, it will introduce competition into the market, and drug prices will come down overall. So that's a little bit about the prescription drugs. Again, I have that on my website, and you can go look at it. We have another question from Facebook from Grace. It says Trump just endorsed Ashley. How will you continue your race? Okay, well, same way I've been continuing it all along. To me, endorsements aren't a big deal because 8 months ago, when we weren't even close to this primary, we had the governor of Iowa come on and endorse Ashley. We had Joni Ernst come on and endorse Ashley. And that was, if I remember right, it was before the time that we had the Iowa State Fair. And if anyone has ever been to the Iowa State Fair, they know, they have a straw poll there every year. And when I got into the race, and Ashley had all these endorsements, I was told by everybody I didn't have a chance at this straw poll. That nobody knew my name, nobody knew who I was, people actually said I wouldn't get out of single digits in the straw poll at the Iowa State Fair. Well, I spent the time in between announcing and the Iowa State Fair, going around to all the county fairs, actually talking to people, giving people my website address so they could go look at what plans I had and could read them for themselves. Money was never a big thing with me. I know that's everybody makes a big deal about that in the campaign, but I spent I think $369.12 in gas driving around to these state fairs, different events, and talking to anybody that would listen to me. And so when the state fair came around, nobody else's expectations were high. I thought if I could garner maybe 15-20%, move on from there, that would be good. When we had the state fair, when they had the straw poll, I walked away with 30% of the vote, which really shocked everybody, and it really gave a boost to my campaign and kind of left everybody else wondering what was going on. And so I've just continued with that. I've never really worried about endorsements. I've never really worried about how much money I've raised, because one of the things that I wanted to try to do was do what everybody said needed to be done in politics, and that was get the money out of politics. And I thought the personal effort that you put into your campaign should be more important than the money. And I also did, I paid for a lot of the stuff myself. So I used my own money, like Donald Trump did, and I just went out there and did it myself and put the personal effort into it, and it has really paid off. and you can see that with my Twitter account. I have, we're approaching 20,000 people on that now already, and that has enabled me not to need a lot of money or not to use a lot of money, because I get a lot of people on there that just constantly write me and tell me, what can I do to help? And we use that. So, like I said, endorsements are a real big thing to me. They never have been. I'll stand on my own 2 feet. I've made a big deal about my candidacy being the only one in this race on either side of the aisle that actually has put his plans down in writing for everybody to read. I've always said that's the way Donald Trump won in 2016, and I think that's very important. And we'll just continue our campaign, and we'll see how this all falls out on June 2nd. So, any other questions out there? Or else I'll start in on talking a little bit more about insurance. Because, like I said, this has been the number one concern in this race, in this whole election cycle, is the insurance. Is healthcare and insurance. Insurance is a big part of it. And those of you that were here last week, I don't want to go through the whole story with my wife and her heart attack and how I learned about this, but I want to talk maybe just a little bit more about insurance itself and what my plans are to get everybody insurance and get everybody insured. And pre-existing conditions is always a big issue. So I'd like to talk to address actual insurance a little bit more. So one of the things that I know we did talk about last time with insurance companies is the insurance companies indemnifying people instead of just going to the hospital, getting a bill, sending it off to the insurance company and not worrying about it. And last week we did discuss how when we do that, you actually wind up paying for most of the bill, and the insurance company pays very little, and you still owe your premiums. So what we need to do with the insurance companies is the same thing that we do with auto insurance, is indemnify people when they have, especially when they have what we would call voluntary procedures like hip replacements, any kind of joint replacements. And what they do with the insurance companies is, as I said last week, insurance companies have better odds makers and better numbers people working for them than the Las Vegas casinos do. And they know how much things cost. And so when you go to have a voluntary procedure done like this, they need to just give you the money that they know this is going to cost and allow you to shop around at the hospital to find the best deal. And that will help bring healthcare costs down at the hospital, because those hospitals will be competing for those dollars. And that's a lot simpler way to do it than, like I said, just the hospital generating bills and shipping them off to the insurance companies. One of the other things that is important that has been going on for several years now is health savings accounts. If you know about my plans, about what I've talked with about health insurance and health care, one of the best ways that we can help lower health costs is to pay actual costs at the hospital. And actual costs at the hospital are a lot cheaper than what you see on an insurance bill. And if you could pay that bill off, your costs will you will reduce those costs even more. And so I'm a very big proponent of health savings accounts. And one of the things that we need to do with health savings accounts is to make them portable within your family. So if you have relatives or other people in your family that need that money out of your health savings account and you want to help out, that you can do that, and there's no tax liability to you. And what we also need to address with the health savings account as far as portability is when you die. When you die, you should be able to put your health savings account in your will just like any other asset. And I think that should be passed along. If we're worried about lowering costs in the medical field and with healthcare, let's not worry about the tax end of this and taxing this every time it's passed from one person to another. Let's pass it on without it being taxed. Either, like I said, either through helping one of your family members out, or if you want to pass it on in your will, let's pass it on to somebody where it can do some good and to keep health costs low. So that's the two things I think we need to do with health savings accounts. And the other thing that we need to do is there are Christian programs out there, programs like MediShare, where you group people together, and it's not so much as insurance as it is that you are kind of helping through a philanthropic way to help pay other people's medical costs. And these Christian medical sharing programs have really taken off, and from the people I've talked to about this, and some of the quote experts I've talked with about these MediShare programs, they work very well, and they really help reduce medical costs because these MediShare programs actually negotiate with the hospitals, just like all of us should be doing with our health care costs. And they're really bringing it down, and they're really making it affordable for people to pay their bills. And the way they work is that you pay a premium every month, and that goes towards helping pay other people's medical bills. And then if you do get sick, then other people help pay yours. So that's kind of the things that we need to do with the insurance. We have a Facebook question from Les. Why do government officials get free health care and our vets don't? They shouldn't. That's one of the things that I get very frustrated with our government officials, is that our government officials live by a whole different set of rules than what the rest of us do. Even the rules they make in Congress usually don't apply to people in Congress. And that's one of the things that we've had in the Republican state platform now. I think this will be the 6th year that we have it in the state platform. Is that if Congress makes a rule, that all rules that Congress make will equally apply to Congress as it does everybody else. And I think that that's very important, because I don't like this whole idea of kind of elitist attitude or this elitist position that Congress has. And that's another one of the things that I've been trying to dismiss or trying to change here with my campaign. I've made it known that I am a working person, that I want to continue to try to be a working person as a congressman. I want to go to Washington. I want to get things done, and I don't want to have to spend all my time coming home and campaigning. I want to come home and I want to work. That was very important to the founders of this nation, that they were actual citizen legislators, and I think we need to get back to that. And that's a very good point that that Les made, that why do we have this it seems like a hierarchy here, that Congress gets all this stuff for nothing, and the people that have given their lives and to make us free and keep us safe, including these congressmen, have so much trouble getting health care. So I agree with you, Les. It's something that's not right, and it is something we need to get rid of, all the little free perks that congressmen have, and maybe that'll give them incentive to actually get things done and get home and work, so that they can enjoy some of the same benefits that everybody else does. We have another Facebook question from Bill. no one talks about dental health care. How would you add that into U.S. health care? I think that the same way that we do with the regular health care, with the actual health care. I think we can develop a dental program that works the same way and along the same lines as regular health care. Because we see the same things with the dental industry, with the eye industry. They all operate on this inflated cost of everything that everybody submits to an insurance company. Then the insurance company discounts it and then gives back what they want to pay to the dentist, to the eye doctors, to the regular healthcare doctors. And you wind up with the same scenario that we talked about last week with the regular health care. You wind up paying a lot of the costs yourself, and the insurance companies get off fairly easy, and you still have to pay your premiums all the time. I've worked the same thing with the dentists that I've had with the doctors. When we need health care, we go to the dentist, we try to stay with the same one all the time. And they know we don't have insurance, and so when we leave the dentist office, we pay our bill because it's a very affordable bill for what we have done. I know when I had insurance, my wife had a couple of crowns done, and we were talking $1,500 to $3,000 a piece. And now that we pay things ourselves, when we need a procedure like that done, we're just talking a few $100s. So that's very important that we incorporate the same type of things that we're trying to do in the regular healthcare to try to do that with dental and with eye care. And I think we can do it by just following some of the things that I've suggested. Just getting back to the insurance for a second, I had mentioned pre-existing conditions, and that's one of the things when I've talked about healthcare that always comes up. Well, what do you do with the people with pre-existing conditions? The way that I see it, what I want to do is for number one, people to understand what insurance is for. People try to use insurance for every little Band-Aid and every little office visit they have to go to, or every little procedure that they need. And that is one of the things that drives up the insurance cost, because when you do all that paperwork, somebody has to do that. There's a lot of labor involved in that, and that just adds to the cost of any kind of procedures. And so what we need to do with to lower health costs is get back what insurance was supposed to be about. If you remember with my wife, we reduced a $50,000 bill down to $7,500 because that was the actual cost of the procedure, and we were allowed to pay that off over time. And so even procedures like that can be paid off, because most hospitals, if you're paying a monthly payment, they're happy with that. They don't charge any interest on that, and you can pay it off. So what I want to do is get back to insurance being used what it's supposed to be used for, because most of us can pay off a $7,500 hospital bill, but a $200,000 or $250,000 hospital bill is going to bankrupt us. And so that's what insurance is supposed to be for, is for those catastrophic incidences. And that's what we have to get back to using it for. And if we look at it that way, and if we use it that way, catastrophic plans will become very cheap, because insurance companies will understand that we are taking on a large part of the responsibility ourselves, and they only have to deal with catastrophic incidences, and that will make those plans very cheap. And so what we can do over time is to get even people with pre-existing conditions into these plans. What I foresee is to open up a program once catastrophic care gets cheap enough to enroll everybody in a catastrophic plan. And we talked about Obamacare last year and how my family was fined $1,500 to $3,000 a year for paying our own bills because we didn't have insurance. So I don't want to make things mandatory, but I think what we can do with the catastrophic insurance is have a 5-year program to say to people, hey, we're opening this program up. Insurance, everybody should have catastrophic insurance. We're not making it mandatory, but it is a good idea, and you should have it, because after this 5-year program or a 10-year program is over, if you get sick and you don't have catastrophic insurance, you're on the hook for it. And that's just the way it's going to be. That's part of, again, personal responsibility. And I think if we have a program like that, over that period, your pre-existing conditions are going to disappear, because people are going to start to have insurance, and there will be no such thing anymore as a pre-existing condition, because everybody will have some type of insurance that's going to cover them. And so that's going to eliminate pre-existing conditions, and everybody will have a catastrophic plan that will be spread out across the nation, because part of my other thing with insurance is eliminating those lines around the states, so that insurance companies can sell to people across the United States and really build big pools. And what you're going to wind up with is everyone having catastrophic insurance at a very cheap price, and our pre-existing conditions will, like I said, they will no longer exist, and they will be eliminated. Everybody will be covered one way or the other, and we can continue to lower healthcare costs. So, anybody else has a question? I don't know if we have any more from Facebook or Twitter, or if anybody on here has a question, you can certainly put it forward now. Otherwise, I will continue to talk about my reform of healthcare. I think we've covered what we have to do with the government. We've covered what we had to do, I think, with hospitals, with again, just touching on something we touched on last week. Hospitals have basically 3 costs for the same procedure: an actual cost, a global cost, and the cost that they send to the insurance company. And I think we need to operate everything on actual costs. And that was one of the things that, again, President Trump signed an executive order to make it mandatory next year in 2021 that hospitals are going to have to show their actual costs for procedures, just like anything else. I always make the analogy, you don't go into McDonald's and not look at the menu and at the costs and just order things and then get a surprise when you get the bill after your order's rung up. Healthcare is the one thing that we have in this country that nobody bothers to ask costs about, and that was one of the ways that myself and my family helped reduce costs, is we ask those questions. What is your actual cost? I don't want the global cost, which is just basically an average cost of what all the hospitals are charging in the area. I don't want the cost that you're charging the insurance company, because I know they're going to discount it. What do you need to make a profit? And so I think if we get to a system like that, where we're using actual costs like we do with every other commodity in America, that'll help reduce health insurance costs. Another Facebook question from Brett. Will you and Ashley have a live debate before the primary? Probably not. I've always been leery about requesting a debate, because I think that is something that the media, if they're going to do their job, which I know that's a joke, but I think there are conservative medias out there that I think that's their responsibility to set up debates like that. I don't think it's my responsibility to request a debate or for her to request a debate. I would love to debate because I think one of the things that we should be serious about if we're going to change Washington is sending the right people to Washington. And one of the things that we have to do with sending the right people to Washington is to know if they have an understanding of the philosophies behind the Constitution, what their feelings are about the Constitution, what plans you have. Like I said, I've made a big deal about having plans on immigration, on taxes, on agriculture, on health insurance. And if we're going to send somebody to Washington, I think we need to know those things about those people. And a debate is a very good way to find out those things, especially if we're going to talk about the Constitution. Everybody talks about they're going to follow the Constitution and they want to support the Constitution. And of course, big thing is the Second Amendment rights. Yeah, I'm going to go out there and I support the Second Amendment and I support freedom of speech. And I don't think 95% of those people actually know the philosophies behind or the histories behind where those amendments came from. And you need to understand those philosophies and you need to understand the history behind those if you are going to interpret them the right way. Even with stuff like the freedom of religion, which has become a big thing here with the shutdowns. I was against these from the beginning, and one of the biggest problems that I've talked with people right now is not being able to go to their church. And if you knew the philosophies behind the First Amendment's freedom of expression of religion clause, you would be up in arms about the government shutting down churches. I think that was a very wrong thing to do, and so I would welcome a debate. If somebody, I've always said I will be willing to debate anybody, anytime, anywhere, on anything. I've got no problem with that, no problem with expressing my thoughts about what I actually believe. I'm not a guy that wets his finger and sticks it up in the air and sees, tries to figure out what the audience wants to hear. My principles and my beliefs are in my head, in my heart, and I will stand by them. And I think that's one of the things that we need to do. But I really don't believe that Ashley wants a debate because so far she really hasn't shown any plans to anybody or shown any understanding of constitutional principles and philosophy. So I do not think that's going to happen. But if it does, I'm sure it will be presented everywhere and advertised everywhere. So thank you for the question, Brett. Just back to the insurance. I know we're running short on time here. I guess that the only thing that two things that I would like to talk about, if we have the time, is we touched on lawyers last time, that the need of tort reform, because malpractice insurance, malpractice suits add billions of dollars to the cost of health care every year. And like I said last week when we talked about this, I think we need to go to a loser pays system so we get rid of frivolous lawsuits. I think if people understand that if they bring a frivolous lawsuit and it gets thrown out of court, that they're going to be responsible for the bills on either side of the case, they're going to think about it a little more about whether they actually have a case and whether this is a good idea going forward. And I guess the last thing that I'd like to talk about is ourselves. If you take a look around at our society today, we here in America, we're the land of plenty, and it shows. Obesity is the #1 cause of death here in America. And when you factor in the causes of heart disease, diabetes, any other disease that is associated with obesity, coronary disease, obesity is our #1 cause of death here in America, and that's just because we've gotten very lax with taking care of our own bodies. If anyone's watched my healthcare video, I start off with saying, you know, our health is the most precious thing we have in life, because if we don't have that, it really nothing else matters. And this was really brought home to me with my own father, because my own father was someone who worked outside all of his life as a lineman. He cross-country skied. He tried to take care of himself. He didn't smoke. He drank moderately, but he wound up with cancer and died at 52 years old. And I can remember the only, and he died 3 months before my daughter was born. And the only thing he really wanted in life was to see a grandchild, and he never got to see that. And even though he took care of himself, his cause of his disease was the company he worked for, because we had companies that, and that's one of the things that we need to do, is hold companies liable for when they create a problem like that, because the reason he had his disease was from transformer PCBs, and even though he did try to take care of himself, he still wound up with it. But I see, you know, a lot of people that don't take 10% of the care that my dad used to take care of himself. We overeat, we don't exercise, we don't realize how precious life is. And you know, with my father passing like that, it made me realize how precious it was. And that is one of the reasons that I really want to push healthcare as the centerpiece of my campaign, because I really want people to have the opportunity to enjoy a long life and enjoy seeing their grandkids grow up and being able to experience as much of life as they wish. And we don't do that now, and we need to realize that that is part of the problem and that we need to take care of it. So I guess I see we're out of time. I thank everybody that has attended tonight. Thank you for your questions. I really appreciate it. I think we covered healthcare pretty thoroughly. If not, you can go to hansenforcongress.com and you can read more. And I'm relying on people understanding that I do have plans, that I do have principles, and that I will stand by them, that I do understand the Constitution, and that's the type of person I will be when I go to Washington. And like I said, with the way things are now with the coronavirus, we don't have a chance to get out and publicly campaign. So counting on all of you. Contact me anytime. Thank you and have a good night. Bye. Done? Okay.